The night was quiet when the mountain first trembled. Not from storms, nor from the shifting of stone, but from something alive, something that had learned to make silence serve it as well as fire. The shepherds on the high slopes spoke of a shadow that passed once and then lingered, though no clouds had gathered. Children in the valley below whispered of a red glimmer in the dark, like a watchful eye peering from the peaks. None of them yet knew a name for it, but already the air had begun to change, sharp, heavy, expectant, like the pause before thunder. Far away, in the black reaches of the northern world, that shadow had been born. The fall of Angband, the ruin of its iron towers and burning pits, had driven its monstrous children into wilderness. Some perished, their might broken without the hand of their master. Some wandered until their hunger made them wild and careless. But one did not squander the lesson of that ruin. One carried away not only fire, but patience. His scales hardened in solitude, his mind sharpened in secrecy. He came to understand that strength, however immense, was never enough without cunning. His name would be Smaug, though in that beginning, his name was not yet feared. It was a secret spoken only in the hollow of his own thoughts. He learned first by listening. The cries of the dying told him more than their weapons ever could. A traitor's plea revealed the wealth of distant kingdoms. A captured scout's final mutter described the way gold could be hidden beneath mountains. Smaug remembered every detail, as if carving maps into the stone of his mind. Where others of his kind roared and conquered in bursts of fire, he was content to wait, to gather, to watch the shape of the world unfold until he knew precisely where to strike. And then, in those half-heard whispers of men and dwarves, he discovered a word that glowed brighter than any jewel: Erebor. A lonely mountain, standing apart from ranges and ridges, carved with halls that shone like daylight even in the deepest dark. Beneath its crown, they said, lay rivers of coin, veins of silver and gold pulled from the rock by hands that sang as they worked. And at the mountain's heart, a single stone, a jewel not made but found, its light said to be captured from the dawn of the world. The Arkenstone, the king's jewel, the heart of the mountain. Smaug did not yet know what it looked like. He only knew that each retelling made his chest tighten, that his sleep grew restless, and that a hunger he had never known before began to coil inside him. It was not the hunger of the belly but of the spirit, a thirst not to consume but to possess. If all the treasures of the world were laid in heaps and mountains, they would mean nothing without that single, burning light. He would not be content until it was his. So the dragon left the wastes of the north. His wings uncoiled, vast as storm fronts, and his shadow rolled over valleys that had never known fear. He did not descend upon them, not yet. Instead, he moved as a rumor, a streak against the moon, a trail of ash where no fire had been. He studied the land with a strategist's eye, the rivers that cut the plains, the roads that fed the mountain, the towns that fattened on trade from Erebor. He learned how men lit their beacons, how dwarves rang their forges, how merchants counted days and trusted schedules like prayers. Every pattern was a weakness waiting to be turned. Every moment of safety was an illusion he would one day shatter. The dwarves of Erebor were proud and busy, their kingdoms swollen with wealth, their halls ringing with song. They thought themselves secure because their walls were thick and their treasures hidden deep. They believed that danger could only come in armies, in banners and war cries that gave warning. They did not see the solitary figure who circled high above them, higher than even their eagles dared to fly. His eyes narrowed to embers as he watched them. They did not feel the attention that had fixed itself upon them, patient and consuming. Smaug had chosen them. The lonely mountain would not remain a kingdom of dwarves for long. It would become something else, a throne of silence, a tomb of wealth, a place where even the bravest voice would falter at the echo of wings. But for now, it stood tall, innocent of its doom, while in the cold sky above, fire banked low in the dragon's chest, waiting for the day when patience would end and hunger would finally speak. The lonely mountain did not guard its wealth with silence. It sang. From Dale's marketplaces to the farthest caravan posts on the running river, songs of Erebor's prosperity traveled faster than wagons could roll. Merchants boasted that no forge in all the world burned hotter, no craftsman's hand struck truer, no vault gleamed brighter. Gold and silver poured out like water from the mountain's heart, and with it came pride, not cruel or careless, but confident, as if the dwarves believed the earth itself had bent in their favor. By day, the valley rang with hammers. By night, music floated down from feasting halls, thick with voices that carried both power and joy. Fireworks from Dale lit the sky in bright bursts that mirrored the smithies below. To men and elves, Erebor was a beacon, proof that skill and labor could carve kingdoms as enduring as the stone itself. To a dragon watching from the high clouds, it was something else entirely, a wound of light in the dark, a brilliance too loud to ignore. Smaug lingered in the upper reaches where no eye could follow. He did not strike, not yet. Instead, he studied. His gaze followed the steady pulse of life that poured into and out of the mountain. He counted the caravans leaving with jeweled cups, iron-forged blades, and casks of silver coin. He traced the guards' rotations, the horn calls at every hour, the gates that opened wide to let wealth pass freely into the waiting hands of traders. And then, at last, he saw it. It was only a glimmer from afar, a pale flash, when the dwarves carried it during their festivals, a jewel set high upon Thorin's grandfather's throne. Yet to Smaug's eyes, it was brighter than all their torches combined, the Arkenstone. Its light pierced the night like a star fallen to earth, a beacon that mocked every restraint he had cultivated. His wings twitched at the sight of it. His chest ached as though something deep inside had been hollow all along, and now the hollowness demanded filling. Still, he did not descend. Desire sharpened him instead of blinding him. He forced his hunger into a weapon of patience. The dwarves had made themselves predictable, festivals each season, trade days set by moon cycles, shipments carried along the same guarded routes. The king believed his prosperity eternal, his defenses perfect. Smaug smiled in his slow, reptilian way. Defenses meant little when one knew how to wait for the exact moment when vigilance turned to habit. Below, life went on untouched. Children in Dale chased wooden toys carved by dwarven smiths. Lovers lingered on bridges to watch the forges glow in the mountain's shadow. Guards leaned lazily on their spears during the quiet hours, muttering that no enemy dared approach such a fortress. Even the river itself seemed to carry laughter on its currents. Smaug saw all of this, and for the first time in his long, solitary existence, he felt something close to wonder, not admiration, but the delight of knowing what would one day be his. Every coin, every hammer, every song, he envisioned them buried beneath his wings, silenced by the sheer weight of his possession. The mountain's voice would not vanish, but be transformed. Where now it sang of labor and life, it would one day sing only of fear, and in that fear Smaug would find his crown. The dragon began to mark the patterns of their vulnerabilities. A shipment of ore too heavily guarded for its worth suggested that something rarer was hidden among it. A secret gate, nearly invisible against the stone, drew his eye when a group of dwarves slipped through at dusk. A passing raven carried word of envoys traveling with gifts, and Smaug tracked their path until he knew the mountain's arteries as well as its veins. And all the while, the Arkenstone burned in his mind. He dreamed of it, imagined its light spilling across his claws, imagined the heat of its glow pressed against his belly. Hunger became worship, and worship became inevitability. Yet fate is cruelly balanced. As Smaug prepared his long campaign, down in Laketown and Dale there were others whose lives unknowingly bent toward his. A bough rested in the corner of a fisherman's house, unremarkable but carefully kept. Its owner, Bard, was just another man among many, quiet, steady-eyed, overlooked in the bustle of markets. He did not yet know his name would be carried in legend alongside the beast who watched him from the clouds. For now, he was simply one more thread in the tapestry of lives woven too brightly, waiting for the moment a dragon's fire would unravel them all. It began not with flame, but with silence. One winter night, the valley beneath Erebor found its rhythm broken. No caravan bells jingled along the river road. No dwarf horns marked the hour. Even the forges seemed strangely muted, their smoke drifting without the usual sparks. To most, it was nothing more than a quiet night. To Smaug, circling high above, it was opportunity. The dragon had studied their patterns long enough to know when silence meant vulnerability. He had watched the guards grow complacent, had seen the dwarves' confidence swell like a tide that thought it would never break. Now, with the Arkenstone blazing in his memory, he could no longer endure stillness. The waiting was done. Smaug descended. The first strike was not upon the mountain itself, but upon its lifeblood, the roads and rivers that fed Dale and Erebor alike. A convoy left the gates at dusk, wagons heavy with ore and hidden treasures bound for trade. They were guarded well, but guarded for an enemy of flesh and steel, not for a shadow with wings vast enough to blot out the stars. Smaug fell upon them with a precision that mocked their preparations. His fire did not pour out indiscriminately. It struck where the hornbearers stood, where the shield wall locked itself, where the bravest gathered first. In moments, the order of defense dissolved into panic. Gold spilled across the road like water as wagons splintered and men fled, blinded by smoke. Only one chest remained untouched, the one Smaug wanted. Its locks were forged by dwarven masters, its weight heavier than it should have been for or alone. When his claws closed around it, he felt the faint pulse within, the Arkenstone. The dragon had imagined this moment 1,000 times, but reality pierced him deeper than fantasy. He tore the chest apart with a tenderness that was almost reverence. And there it was, glowing, steady, unyielding, a fragment of starlight caged in crystal. The jewel's light played across his scales, and for a heartbeat, Smaug was not predator nor conqueror, but something else, almost worshipper, almost lover. He curled his body around it, shuddering as though a thirst older than memory had finally been quenched. But obsession is never gentle for long. The more he gazed at it, the more he knew, the Arkenstone was not enough. Not alone. The mountain that birthed it, the halls that framed it, the wealth that bowed to it, all must be his. Only then would possession feel complete. And so patience broke. Smaug no longer intended to bleed the mountain slowly with raids and shadows. He would take it whole, in one blaze that no song could forget. Yet even as he claimed his prize, a new thread entered the tale. From Lake Town, far down the river, a fisherman named Bard saw the smoke rise against the winter sky. He heard the distant cries carried on the cold air. While others muttered of storms or brigands, Bard's gaze sharpened. He felt the tremor in his father had told him the story of the Black Arrow, the single shaft meant for a day of ruin. Bard had never believed such ruin would come. Now, staring northward, he was no longer certain. In the days that followed, the valley shivered beneath omens. Smoke columns appeared where no village stood. Travelers vanished on the road. Ravens circled. Farmers returned to fields of ash where their cottages once stood. At night, watchers swore they saw a shape blotting out the stars, vast and slow, circling higher than any bird dared fly. Yet when they sounded the alarm, nothing descended. Only silence, heavy as dread, settled again over the valley. In Erebor's throne room, King Thror paced beneath vaulted ceilings, his crown gleaming as though mocking his unease. Dwarves argued around him, some demanding armies, others insisting on more secret convoys. None could agree, for none understood what stalked them. To admit the truth, that a dragon had fixed its hunger upon their mountain, was to admit there was no defense strong enough. In Dale, life strained under a brittle pretense of normalcy. Merchants still opened stalls, children still ran through the streets, but their laughter carried a hollow edge. At the taverns, men whispered of vanished neighbors, of charred earth on the borders. Yet whenever someone dared to speak the word dragon, others hushed them fiercely, as though the sound alone might summon the beast. Bard did not hush. Standing on the wooden bridge that crossed the long lake, he watched the mountain each evening, its crown wreathed in faint smoke no forge could explain. His bow rested against his shoulder, his jaw set in the silence of a man who has already seen the shape of calamity. When his neighbors urged him to drink, to laugh, to dismiss the shadows as tricks of the eye, Bard only shook his head. "You hear nothing because you refuse to listen," he told them once, his voice quiet but edged with steel. "The sky has been warning us for weeks. Fire waits above. And when it falls, your songs will not protect you." The others muttered that Bard was dour, too cautious, too grim. Yet secretly, some began to look northward with his same unease. Mothers clutched their children a little tighter at night. Old men sharpened forgotten blades. The shadow was working its way into every heart. Meanwhile, high above, Smaug prepared. The Arkenstone now lay nestled against his chest as he slept in hidden caverns, its glow painting the dark with restless light. It was no longer enough merely to hold it. Every breath reminded him that the mountain itself was not yet his, that dwarven voices still sang where silence should reign. Each song struck him as insult, each laugh as defiance. His hunger was no longer patient, it was fever. He circled closer now, his wings stirring the treetops as he passed. Villagers woke in the night to the sound of rushing wind, windows rattling in their frames, though no storm had touched the valley. In the mountains, shepherds vanished with their flocks, leaving only scorched patches of grass where the animals had been. Smaug was not merely hunting, he was reminding them that fear itself belonged to him. Back in Lake Town, Bard sat with his son beside the hearth. The boy traced the dark bow that rested across the wall, running his fingers over the strange carvings etched along its length. "Will it be enough?" he asked softly. Bard did not answer immediately. His hand closed around the arrow that had been handed down through generations, black-feathered and heavy as destiny. He remembered his father's words, "When the world darkens, the black arrow flies true." Finally, he said, "It will have to be." Outside, the night split with a roar that rattled the lake to its depths. The townsfolk poured from their homes, eyes wide, faces pale, as fire streaked across the distant peaks. The mountain itself seemed to shudder as wings struck the air. Smaug was no longer a shadow. He was fire incarnate, a living storm descending upon the realm he had chosen. The stage was set. The jewel had been claimed, the king unsettled, the people divided between fear and denial. And in the middle of it all, one archer with a single arrow waited, knowing that when the fire came, he alone might stand between life and annihilation. The climax loomed, and there would be no turning back. The mountain split with a sound like the world cracking open. Smaug tore through the night, wings driving storms before him, fire welling in his throat until the air itself glowed. The gates of Erebor burst into flame as though the stone had been soaked in oil. Dwarves rushed to defend their home, shields lifted against a heat that turned iron molten in their hands. Their battle cries rose, but each was swallowed by the roar of a creature who had waited too long and would be denied no longer. Gold melted in the vaults, flowing like rivers of sun. Statues of kings collapsed into slag. In Dale, the people looked up to see the sky itself burning. Mothers dragged their children toward the lake. Fathers stood rooted as towers cracked and fell. The joyous city that had once mirrored the wealth of Erebor now drowned in shadows of wings vast enough to smother hope itself. From the highest tower of the mountain, King Thror watched his life's work unravel. He shouted commands, but the words scattered like sparks in the wind. His crown slipped as stone shattered around him, and when Smaug's fire poured through the halls, the king's final cry was not of defiance, but of disbelief. No fortress, no wealth, no song could withstand such fury. The dragon had not come to conquer. He had come to end. The people of Dale fled into the night, but the shadow followed them. Boats overturned in the rush, children were separated from parents, the air choked with ash. The wooden houses along the water ignited like torches, one after another, until the long lake became a mirror of flame. In the midst of it all, one figure did not run. Bard stood on the creaking timbers of the bridge, the bow in his hands, the black arrow nocked and waiting. His face was pale but steady, his eyes reflecting both fire and fear. Around him, chaos reigned, villagers screaming, water boiling beneath raining embers, the world itself shuddering. Yet he was still, as if the chaos had narrowed into a single unbearable point. Above, Smaug turned his great body in a circle of triumph, the Arkenstone's glow flashing between his scales. His laughter shook the air, not joy, but a terrible certainty, as though nothing on earth could resist him. He opened his jaws and fire bloomed, spilling downward to consume bridge, man and town alike. And then Bard released. The black arrow flew, cutting through smoke and heat, a line of darkness against the blaze. It did not waver. It did not falter. The arrow struck beneath the left breast, where the dragon's armor thinned, where scale gave way to a seam of vulnerable flesh. For a heartbeat the world froze. Smaug's roar shattered the night. The fire in his throat choked and stuttered. His wings faltered, striking the air in wild, panicked sweeps. He writhed above the lake, his body a storm of flame and shadow, every movement tearing the sky itself apart. The Arkenstone slipped from his chest, tumbling in the chaos of his convulsions, but he clutched it tight again, desperate, unwilling to let go. The lake rose to meet him. When he struck, the water erupted in a tower of steam and fire, a hiss so deafening it seemed the earth itself screamed. For long moments, nothing could be seen, only boiling waves, only darkness lit by the last sparks of a dying inferno. And then silence. The townsfolk, crouched on the banks, dared to look. Where moments ago a terror had filled the sky, there was only water rippling, broken timbers floating, and smoke drifting like funeral cloth across the night. The dragon who had shadowed their world was gone, sunk into the lake's black depths. Bard stood unmoving, bow still in hand, the string snapped from the force of release. His face was streaked with soot and tears, his breath ragged. Around him, people began to weep, some from grief, some from disbelief, some from the fragile hope that they had survived what no one should have. And yet, in the hearts of many, one truth burned brighter than the flames still crackling in the ruins: the dragon was dead. The terror of generations had fallen, not to armies or kings, but to one man and one arrow. The climax had come, and in its wake, silence heavier than fire. When dawn came, the lake still smoked. The people of Lake Town stood along the broken piers, staring at the water as though it might rise again and deliver their doom anew. The night had stolen too much, homes burned to black husks, families scattered, voices silenced forever. Yet the terror that had filled the sky was gone. The dragon lay beneath the waves, unseen but undeniable, his fire quenched, his wings forever folded. In Erebor, silence reigned where once music had thundered. The halls that had glowed with smith fires and song were choked with smoke and ruin. Gold, once a river of pride, had hardened into grotesque shapes, statues of flame frozen mid-collapse. No king's voice echoed through the chambers. Only ash remained ash, and the faint, eerie gleam of the Arkenstone, still pulsing softly in the depths as though it mourned what it had witnessed. Bard walked through the wreckage of his town with the bow unstrung across his back. People gathered around him, their eyes filled with a fragile mix of gratitude and grief. They called him hero, savior, dragonslayer, words heavy as crowns. Bard did not answer them. He looked instead at the faces of those who searched for loved ones in the ruins, at the children clutching one another beneath the smoke. His heart was as heavy as the arrow he had loosed, and he wondered if any act of salvation was worth such a price. Yet history is never gentle. It does not ask whether a man wished to be legend. It writes his name in fire, whether he wills it or not. And so Bard's silence became part of his myth, his refusal to boast becoming proof of a strength deeper than muscle. The tale of Smaug's fall spread quickly, carried by ravens and wanderers, whispered at firesides and carved into songs. Some said the dragon had been struck down by fate itself, others that the mountain's pride had finally called destruction upon itself. Yet all agreed on one image: a lone man on a wooden bridge, facing fire with only one arrow, and loosing it with the steadiness of someone who had nothing left to lose. But legends are more than victories. They're scars. The valley bore them in every shadow of ruined stone. Children grew up with the smell of smoke lingering in their dreams. Dwarves returned to halls that no longer felt like home, their songs echoing against walls that remembered fire more keenly than laughter. And in the heart of the mountain, the Arkenstone gleamed on, bright but lonely, as if mocking the truth that no treasure, however radiant, could protect against hunger dressed as destiny. As years passed, the story shifted. To some, Smaug became a caution, a warning against greed and arrogance. To others, he was almost a tragic figure, a creature undone by the very desire that defined him. And Bard, the man who felled him, became less a fisherman and more a symbol of endurance, of watchfulness, of the quiet strength that waits until the world has no choice but to call upon it. Yet the truth, beneath all retellings, remained simpler. A kingdom sang too loudly of its wealth. A dragon listened too carefully. And when fire met stone, it was not kings or armies that turned the tide, but one arrow guided by a steady hand. So remember this, if you listen by firelight or drift toward sleep, not all endings are triumph, not all heroes rejoice. Some victories weigh heavier than defeat. Some treasures burn brighter than the lives they consume. And somewhere, in the hush that follows destruction, the world holds its breath as though waiting to see what will rise from the ashes, and what echoes will linger long after the fire has gone. The lake still smokes. The mountain still gleams. And the story, like the Arkenstone, will go on shining long after all who lived it are dust.